everyone. It's your host, Leani Lopez, here with another episode of I Got Nothing, a podcast for exhausted writers. Today, I'm joined by a fellow exhausted writer. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. This is Gabriel Garcia. Many of you on the interwebs may know me as the Wandering Scribe. I'm an indie author and a podcast host. I'm also a classical historian. I specialize in classical antiquities, which is ancient Greece, ancient Roman history, but I also dabble in medieval history, pre-colonial history, and I'm so excited to be here, and I look forward to answering all of your questions.
Thank you for joining me today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your writing journey, like how you got started? Was this something that you always knew you wanted to do, or did it kind of develop later?
Well, Leani, it actually began in a series of stages. So I've always been a reader before I became a writer. I remember reading books like Geronimo Stilton, the Hank Zipser books by Henry Winkler, the Zach Files, Franny K. Stein. I was a big reader. And then in the third grade, I was asked by my teacher, my third grade teacher, Mrs. Strauss, to write a Halloween short story inspired by the Goosebumps. I did, and it was well received. And I wouldn't pick up the pen, so to speak, until I was a little bit older, around high school, where I attempted to write my first story. Now, at that time, I knew absolutely nothing of writing, absolutely nothing. But fast forward a few years into 2020, I was in graduate school. And when the lockdown hit, I realized I have all this free time. Let me actually try to write something. And that's what led to The Gathering, which was my first book. Then its follow-up, Son of Persia. Then followed up by Michael, Last Angel of Earth, and Decimus, The Wolf of Rome. All four of my books, which are available on Amazon and Barnes& and Noble, were all written during the lockdown period. They are my COVID books.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I mean, what else were you going to do during that time? If you're going to dive into writing, that was the time to do it.
Absolutely. It honestly kept me busy, and it kept me pretty much sane because almost all my classes were remote. And well, yes, I did get a chance to go back the last semester to, have the true college experience. It wasn't the same. And then after I graduated, that's when I began researching. Initially, I wanted to go hybrid and small press. And I almost became a sucker for vanity publishing, but I'm so glad I didn't go down that road. And I just went indie, and for a long time I was a Barnes& and Noble only author until, I want to say, a few months ago, I want to say October. That's when I started putting myself on Amazon. And I know a lot of fellow indie authors have issues with Amazon. I have my complaints, but you cannot deny that for indie authors, Amazon has the largest distribution center for indie books. And I've actually made more on Amazon in those few months than I've made on Barnes& and Noble in the last 3 years.
I was literally talking to somebody about this earlier today because my friend's getting ready to release her own book, as an indie author. And she's going with Amazon, and she's like, I know. And I was like, hey, no, I am not giving you any crap about that. I totally understand both sides. Unfortunately, yeah, they are the biggest distributor right now. And everybody uses Amazon. So it is a market that is easy to get into, even though it does have its problems. So I totally understand.
Honestly, I've got a lot of people who have bought my books from Amazon, and most of them have been in Europe. They've actually been a lot of my fellow indies, fellow creatives, and friends that I've met on my YouTube channel, which I also forgot to mention. around the time that I was writing my books, I was also in the midst of, developing my YouTube channel. And it wasn't until I want to say 2022 that I decided to pursue my YouTube channel for the Wandering Scribe. And for those that know the origins, I actually began doing that on Spotify, like this audio interviews, before I just started doing YouTube interviews.
Interesting. That's so cool. It's also, I connect with that so much because the original idea for this podcast started literally right before COVID happened. And I wanted to interview other authors. I wanted to do it locally because I have a couple of author friends in the area, or I did at the time. And then COVID hit, and a lot of this technology that allows us to make calls and records was not as good back then. It became good, and it was worked on during the pandemic. So I started it as a solo kind of, this is my writing advice. And I thought I was going to be done with it in 2023. And then I kind of had this feeling like, no, I can do the interview portion now. I can finally do this podcast the way it was originally planned, which is what's happening now. So it's wild how those things develop and how it becomes something more than you originally thought it would be.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's so interesting to see, but I actually go back and listen to some of the old episodes that are on originally Anchor and then now on Spotify. And it's just so funny to think like how far the channel has grown, because in total I've been doing it for about now 7 years around that time, which is insane because I never imagined myself doing this, Leani. I never imagined myself doing, podcasting. I did
Yeah.
podcasting to, stay busy, keep in contact with friends, and it sort of just blossomed, and it now became another passion that I'm trying to make into a business.
Yeah. I think what helps things develop like that is the passion you find when you're doing it. Which is why I always try to encourage people when they're like, oh, I might do a podcast or I might do this. I don't know. And I'm like, try it. Just try it, because you never know what will evolve from it. That may not be something you continue, but it may lead to something else. Like, I have been doing podcasting for a while. I was on a podcast with somebody for a couple of years, and I edited all the episodes, and I found I actually quite liked it, and I kind of got the hang of it, which is what led to me starting to do audio dramas. So it went from like just this fun thing I did on weekends to, oh, I can tell new stories in a completely different format that I can do right here, right now. And it just evolved from that. And because you never know where that thread is going to lead.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So when you finished the first book, The Gathering, what did it feel like to finish that first book?
Well, it felt like an accomplishment, to say the least, Leani. It felt like I had completed something that I never thought I would. And for those that know me and know a little bit more, before I decided to publish The Gathering initially, I posted all my work on Inkit, the online writing platform. And a lot of my fellow authors and friends, Kim Applegren, Lori Ball, Jaden Winchester, all of us began our careers on Inkit. That's how we met. That's how we talk, and we're still very good friends to this day. And when I posted the full story on Inkit and just waiting for reviews, I was so amazed by the amount of positive feedback that I was getting. Everybody loved The Gathering. Everybody told me who their favorite character was, what favorite scene they loved, and just realizing, oh, I could actually do this. I could see myself writing stories. And no soon after I had written The Gathering, I took a month or two off to write the outline for Son of Persia, the spin-offs slash not direct sequel, but it's in the same universe, and just started writing. And just like before, once it was finished, put it on Inkitt. Moved on to Michael, same thing, put it on Inkitt. And the same thing with Decimus. All of my books, before they were published, were all published on Inkitt for people to read. And a lot of people have enjoyed my stories. They have been amazed by what I was able to write and the characters. Everyone who has read my works have told me that I'm a very descriptive writer, very visual writer. I tend to go heavy on the descriptions because I like it to be very cinematic and immersive. And going back to your original question about what I felt once The Gathering was completed, I was just blown away by the fact that I'd written this story that was my own.
Yeah. That feeling with all the authors I've spoken to, it's unless you've experienced it, it's so indescribable. Like I was used to not really sharing my work. I shared it with a couple of close people, but when I was writing, it was mostly for myself. And I think the first time I had that kind of feedback that you were talking about was when we were preparing to do my first audio drama, which is called To Court Death. And it was originally written as a screenplay, so it was very easy to break up into 5 parts. And it was a very small cast. So I actually had a table read for that, which was really cool. And also super nerve-wracking because this was the first time my good friends were reading my work. And not only doing that, they were acting it out in front of me. And so I just watched the whole thing with this like feeling of surrealism that these people are reading out loud the words that I wrote. And at the end, I was like, very much like, what'd you guys think? Like, and because I had noticed towards the end, some of the characters who had already finished their scenes were just being very respectful and quiet. But I realized they were being engaged with the last 2 people who were doing scenes. Like, they weren't like on their phones. They weren't like, oh, my scene's done. They were engaged the whole time, which was its own reward. And they had wonderful compliments and it made me feel really good. And then they were like, well, what did you think of us? And it was so cool. And the response I've gotten from my newest audio drama, Battle Cry, which came out last year, has just blown me away. Like, people in our community, when I've been at markets and stuff and I've kind of been like, oh, this is the thing I did, they're like, oh yeah, I heard of that. I heard about that. And for a creator, that's like the highest compliment. That means people are talking about it when you're not around.
Yes, absolutely. And that feeling where like, oh, this is where I'm meant to be, just makes everything worthwhile.
It does. And it gives you so much encouragement to have that feedback, that direct feedback. Because even with Battle Cry, I was writing that script all on my own. And towards the end, I was very much battling imposter syndrome because it was the biggest project I've ever done. And it was something that I was going to return to. It was going to have multiple seasons. So I was setting a lot of groundwork for like the future of the series, which is a lot of pressure. And I was like, yes, the episodes are drafted. I'm going to have to go back. And so I was listening to the document read the words to me so that I could edit, because I tend to leave out words when I'm writing really fast. And I realized at a certain point I wasn't taking notes anymore. I was just listening to the story.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, no, this is good. This is good. I'm being crazy. But Sometimes it can take a long time to get to that point, but when you do, you're like, I am unstoppable.
Yes,
No one can stand in my way right now.
absolutely, absolutely.
So when it comes to writing and, and working on your YouTube channel and doing all these wonderful things, what kind of either writing rituals or creative rituals do you do to kind of get your mind in the mindset that it needs to be?
So for me, most of my interviews for my podcast are usually in the morning, Monday through Friday, and occasionally the weekends. Like I am constantly busy, Leani. I
Oh, I
am
feel ya.
always busy. I think last month I had about, I want to say almost close to like maybe like almost close to 20 interviews for a month, which is
Oh,
absolutely insane. Like each week I would have at least maybe 1 to 3 guests per day just doing interviews like these.
yeah.
So for my writing, I am typically a night owl. I don't get home until like maybe 7 o'clock at night. And once I do, relax, take a breather for a moment, I just sit in front of my computer and I just write. And I put a timer on my phone for 20 minutes. I just do 20 minutes of writing. And yeah, it's been very, very helpful. And sometimes I'll go back to a chapter that I was working on. And I've actually noticed myself that it may take me about a few days to just finish one chapter because I have a lot to say for that chapter. Case in point, for Decimus, I wanted to get that book published last year, and I was in like the last few months of 2025. So I made a commitment of writing 45 minutes a day, 7 days a week, and that was something that I used to do before, but as I've been doing more interviews, I realized I couldn't keep doing that because, as one of my good friends said, shout out to Mark McLean for this, he pointed out that for authors who are able to write like that, kudos for them, but for others who are trying to do it, really take a hard look and think, how much creativity can you pump out every day? It's
Yes.
not easy. So there have been days where I have not written anything, or I'll work on a different project, which I have multiple of, and just, take some time off mentally from that story and go back to that within like 2 days.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be really mentally taxing. I mean, I have been writing full time since 2018. But for a couple of years after that, I had to homeschool my son who has special needs. And the only time I had to actually write was when he was at his 3 hour therapy every day. So I had to cram my work into that 3 hour session. And some days, it's not like I wrote for the whole 3 hours because that's crazy, but I had to train myself to write really quickly in a short amount of time. And when he finally became old enough to go to a special school, which he's been thriving at, I finally had, like, the last 2 or 3 years or so was the first time that I was writing full time as and actually writing full time during the day. And like you said, I couldn't do that everyday thing anymore. I didn't have the energy to, and I kept burning out very, very fast because I also ghostwrite on top of my other work. So that's a lot of creative energy. And I found that if I took a day or two off, I ended up writing more at my next writing session than I would have if I had pushed through those 3 days.
Absolutely. And almost kind of very similarly, in addition to being an author, I am also a freelance history writer. I write articles on history for different magazines. I write for my friend, Courtney Atkins Publications, Mossy Point Publishing. More recently, I've been writing articles for Strategy and Tactics, the largest military history magazine in the United States. I've actually been published numerous times, and it's not easy trying to balance everything out because you have so many different obligations. But you just got to find a routine or a schedule that works and a balance that ultimately works because you can't edit a blank page. You got to do something.
I say that all the time. I'm also an author coach, and I've helped a lot of people getting started with writing who have never written before. And I always tell them, I was like, you can't edit a blank page. I'm like, the first draft just has to exist. It doesn't have to be good. You can do that later.
Yes, absolutely.
So when you get a new writing idea and it sort of takes hold of you, how do you develop that further?
Ooh, that's a very good question. So I think probably a lot of your other guests have said the same thing, Leani. We are always inspired by the stories we've read, the movies we've seen, the video games we played. We are always inspired by outside media. And I'll give a good example of this. So my third book, Michael, Last Angel of Earth, was in a way inspired by the Darksiders video game for the major plot of that series, which was what happens when the apocalypse starts too early and it needs to be fixed. That is in the first video game in the series, which follows the Horseman War. Now, for Michael, I wanted to do something different. Instead of it being, let's say, a human or a demon, let's have it be an angel. But not just any angel, an archangel, one of the most famous, being Michael. And from there, that's when I started tinkering of like, okay, well, what is this world going to look like? How is he going to react? So I try to make an angel very human and just build upon that. And I also had a lot of mythology, a lot of theology in it. I didn't want to be too preachy, but I wanted my readers to learn something from the character of Michael. And a lot of people say that out of all four of my books, Michael is arguably the one I'm best known for. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with Michael being the one that, gets my name out there to people to check out my work. Because honestly, Michael was definitely a challenge for me. And the reason why I say that, Leani, is because up until this point, I had only written historical fiction, speculative fiction with a little bit of sci-fi fantasy elements, being The Gathering and Son of Persia. Michael was my first ever true high epic fantasy adventure.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I wanted to know exactly how to write a story like this. And honestly, one of my favorite chapters to write in Michael, Last Angel of Earth, is the battle for Vatican City, where I specifically base it off of the film version of the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Oh, such a good battle.
It is. And the dialogue, I didn't use it word for word, but I want to have that same quippiness between two characters, Horus and Ruzla. Ruzla's a gargoyle, and Horus is, of course, the Egyptian god and prince of Egypt. And they're having a very similar banter like Legolas and Gimli. And Horus is just not happy that Ruzla is killing more than he is. So he is just going into the fray and really also getting to show some of the human characters as well. Especially another great scene in that chapter is a character of Margaret, who is was a young girl that Michael kind of raised and adopted and protected over the years, and she's never killed anyone. And so imagine her in like modified medieval armor with a little bit of SWAT gear, so it's like a mesh of the two, and she's fighting and she kills her first enemy, and she realizes, oh, like these aren't demons, like these are just, regular people. And she's now psyching herself, realizing these aren't demons. I can do this.
Oh
I can do
no.
this.
Yeah.
And then she now starts acting like a warrior and a soldier. And my favorite follow up line to that is there's a female knight that she befriends who says, "It's okay, little sister, there are more," and just points right behind Margaret and says, "There's some more people to fight." And I just absolutely love that chapter. That was probably one of my favorite chapters to write out of the whole book.
That is so fun. I love banter. I love writing banter. And the thing I love most when you were describing that scene is how centered around the characters it is. Because for me, characters are the most important part of my stories. And stories in general, if they're, I mean, you can have a great plot, you can have a great structure, you can describe things beautifully, but if your characters are not well rounded, if they don't make sense, or if I can't connect with them, then it doesn't matter how good the rest of the story is. I just disengage.
Yes.
Yeah, and I love that, and I loved how you took that initial idea and developed it, because I had something similar with my current book that I'm working on, which is the first book in a queer pirates romance series. And the original
Ooh.
idea came because I was playing the crap out of Assassin's Creed Black Flag.
Oh, good
And I
one.
was like, and I love Matt Ryan, who played Edward Kenway. So my character Edmund is like homage to him because he also played John Constantine.
Hmm.
But when I started writing it, it originally started as a fanfic until I realized, no, this is something different. I was like, I'm writing something different. And I finally, after many years, completed the draft last year. And I'm editing it now. And I feel I kept that core, like, Black Flag energy, but just expanded it and expanded the characters. And I love that media can do that. I always tell people one of my pieces of advice to new writers is to listen or engage in other types of media, because you never know what's going to inspire you.
Absolutely, Leani. And also, fun fact, and this is a special for your listeners. I actually got the chance to meet Matt Ryan and Roger Craig Smith virtually, but still had the opportunity to meet them. And they actually give a shout out to my friend Kim Applegren, who's a die-hard Assassin's Creed fan. And
Oh
that
my
was
God.
honestly one of the best experiences of my life in terms of meeting celebrities.
I'm so jealous. And actually, speaking of inspired by John Constantine and other media, same thing with Battlecry, my audio drama. Started off as a Constantine fanfic until I realized it was something different. So the character of 42, you find out his name is John, specifically as homage to Constantine.
Yes, and since you also just brought up fanfic, I've also written, and again, a lot of people may not know this, I've also written my own series of fanfics. One is Assassin's Creed World at War, which focuses on a young man who finds out his fiance is a Templar agent and somehow gets embroiled in the war between the assassins and the Templars in the midst of World War II, who then has to get training from Nikolai Orlov, who did not die in the canon. He actually survived in this story and trains the main character. I've written a Justice League fan fiction series called "The New Trinity," Birth of the New Trinity, which is a spin-off, or rather, I should say, my interpretation of the Earth 2 storyline by DC Comics. But probably my favorite fan fiction to write, and I might actually go back to write this, is Star Wars Son of Mandalore, which honestly is my favorite fan fiction because that character that I wrote was a character that I played for my Star Wars theater group. We did choreographed saber fights in and out of the Las Vegas area where I went to school. So the character of Karem Sundar was a character that I was playing with my theater group.
That's amazing. That's so cool. And I just immediately had this thought that because I play one of the main characters in Battle Cry, and I realized I have written scenes where I can interact with Constantine. God damn it. It's a wonderful, embarrassing thought to have as as you're speaking about fan fiction.
Yes,
But
yes,
it helps. It's such an inspiration, and I also see fan fiction as my like writing self care. Like that's what I do for myself.
yes, 100% agree. 100% agree. And again, going back to your original question was, creativity. There's one other scene in Michael which I absolutely love to death. It's my favorite, like, final ending cry. And it is with the villain of the book, the Dragon King, Zadakoth, who fights Michael, who's been um spoiler, he's been reimbued with his powers as an angel, but he's now the new angel of death. He's taken the moniker of Azrael, and they're fighting, and he pretty much cleaves Zarakoth in two. Zarakoth's still alive, but he's like dying. And in a final, like, climactic ending, there is my favorite line that I wrote where Michael Azrael says to Zarakoth, "For all of you've done to my family, to my home, burn in hell." And he takes off his hood, and it's a flaming blue skull, and he just spews blue fire onto Zarakoth and just burns him alive. So I took an homage of the Ghost Rider aspect of who he
Yes, I was
is.
just gonna say that's a very Ghost Rider. Yeah,
Yes, and oh, that was probably one of my favorite scenes. And honestly, it was a much better scene because initially I wanted, Michael to, burn Zadakoth, but have almost like forgive him. And I thought, there's no way the character is going to be like that. No, he's going to
yeah,
give like damning retribution to the Dragon King. So I changed it, and honestly, a lot of people love that more than the original one that was on Inkit.
yeah. When you have an idea like that, this is what writers mean when they say characters do their own thing. Like you can plan all this stuff, but when you're in the moment and when you're really connected with your character, they're gonna pull some moves that you're like, oh, okay, no, yeah, no, you're right. What I was planning is not how this is gonna go down. I think the best stories are the writers who let that happen.
Yes, I absolutely 100% agree. I've talked to a lot of people on the show who have said that they don't write the story, the characters write the story. They
Yeah,
are just the vessel.
yeah, yeah. I completely agree with that. And since this is a writing advice podcast, we'll sort of wrap it up here with this last question. What is the best or worst piece of writing advice you've ever received?
The best piece of writing advice that I have received, there's been a lot, Leani, there's been a lot I've gotten from a lot of great people. But if I honestly had to pick the one that has really stuck with me is understand why you want to be a writer. Being a writer in this industry is not a money maker. There's no guarantee your book's going to be an overnight success and you're going to financially recover from your ventures of being an author. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of hard work, especially if you go the route of an indie or self published author. If you understand why you're getting into this and you manage your finances, that is going to help you because it's not so much being an author it's difficult, it's marketing ourselves as authors.
Yup, that's the hardest part. Yep.
Yeah, there are so many avenues to publish, but it's never been more difficult to market ourselves, and it is a pain in the butt to do. I still struggle with marketing, but I would definitely say, in addition, build your team, build your networking group, because as authors, we are in this industry together. We are in this industry to help one another. I know people will sometimes say there's kind of like a little love hate relationship between the different types of authors, from traditional authors to indie authors to hybrid authors, but we're all still in the same boat anyway. We're in the same boat. And for my advice to give to the listeners out there is, find the balance between your individuality and authenticity as a writer, but also understand the marketability. What I mean by that is, when you write a book, you want the readers to hear your voice. You don't want them to hear anyone else. Even though, as we mentioned, you're going to be inspired by a lot of other authors growing up and also reading on the side. When you're writing your book, your story that you're passionate about, you don't want to make it too familiar, in the sense that people are going to say it's a knockoff version of someone else's story,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you don't want it to be too original that's going to throw people off. You want to find that sweet balance, because readers in genres have expectations of how a story is supposed to go. And I know a lot of people say don't write for readers, don't write for your audience. For me, what I will say is this: when you're writing a story, write the story that's going to encourage people to read. I've had a lot of people on the show tell me that they didn't pick up reading again until they were in their 30s,
Yeah.
because they had not read for a very, very long time. So, my advice to the listeners out there: write the story that's going to encourage people to read and pick up a book again.
Yeah, and that's fantastic advice. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about genres, because certain genres come with certain expectations. And I think a lot of people go in wanting to be innovative, which is great, but they do it at the expense of knowing what genre they are writing for and what is expected of that genre. And I feel like until you learn those rules, you can't really start to break them, because then you're just kind of inventing your own thing. You're not really expanding the genre into something else if you don't understand the fundamentals of it to begin with.
Yes, absolutely. Very true.
Well, Gabriel, thank you so much for joining me. This was so fun. And if we had more time, we probably could just keep talking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I want to give a huge thank you to you, Leani, for allowing me on your show and having this opportunity to showcase a little bit more of who I am behind the author lenses.
Of course, of course. Where can people find you online?
Of course. So I am on LinkedIn, which is tied to my YouTube channel. In fact, all of my social media is found on my YouTube channel. The links are there. So if you look for Tales for the Wandering Scribe or Gabriel Garcia, the Wandering Scribe, you will find me. But if you want it to be easier, you can find everything on Instagram at Arbiter283. And if you are an indie author, narrator, editor, PA, or graphic illustrator, I am looking for people to be part of my lineup. And if that is interesting to you and want to be a part of that, just message me and I will send you the application link to apply. And all of my books can be found on Amazon and Barnes& and Noble. All those links are in my Instagram as well as my YouTube channel.
Great. And I will put the link to the YouTube channel in the episode description for people to find.
Awesome.
This is a reminder that I do have a Patreon. Patrons receive episodes up to 2 days earlier than the general public. There are exclusive blogs and podcast episodes that are only found on Patreon. You'll also receive discounts on writing services, behind-the-scenes tidbits for Battle Cry, including access to our blooper reel, access to my Discord server, and shout-outs in future podcast episodes. So head over to patreon.com/Leani M. Lopez or check out the link in the description. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for joining me, and thank you, listeners, for hanging out with us today. And as always, happy writing.